Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and LEAP, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergen, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with tests, school, and life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years' experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is how and why to perform your best on the PSAT. But first, let's meet our special guest, Brian Stewart.
Brian Stewart began his career in test prep as a part-time tutor over the summer. As Brian worked with more students, word spread all over Central Ohio about the quality of his tutoring services. In 2011, Brian left his day job to run BWS Education Consulting full-time. In 2012, Brian was chosen by Barron's Educational Series to write Barron's ACT, and he has gone on to write several ACT, SAT, and PSAT books, selling hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide. Since then, BWS Education has expanded with a team of committed educators who relentlessly look for the best way to deliver educational enrichments to its clients, whether it's test prep, academic help, or college admissions counseling. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you guys again.
Brian, it is great to have you back again. Somehow we find a way to have you on the show every year around PSAT time.
Yep.
Our association goes back all the way to episode 33 when we first discussed
Those are the early days, by the way, Brian.
33, right?
Yeah.
Episode 383 to discuss should you prepare for the PSAT. Episode 507 to discuss the new digital PSAT. It's not new anymore. Episode 590 to discuss how to prep for the digital PSAT. No doubt longtime listeners know who you are, but many of our listeners are new. So please share with our audience a bit more about who you are, what you do, and why, as far as Amy and I are concerned, you are the resource to discuss the PSAT.
Well, thanks so much for having me on again. It's when the leaves start to change. It's usually PSAT podcast time once again. So, I've been doing tutoring and test prep for about 20 years and worked with students from all ability levels. And in addition to doing test prep, my wife and I homeschool our kids, and we work with students at different schools. And I also am the author of several test prep books with Barron's. So, I kind of just work with students all different sorts of ways to help them get ready for school and life. Yep.
How has that work evolved now that you've obviously worked with Barron's and like the PSAT, SAT changes? How are you feeling about now a few years into that series? How predictable is the book or the books?
Yeah, it's a little tricky with when you're writing a book, you have to have a long lead time because of printing requirements. So when there is a new test change, it can be very stressful. In fact, when the digital SAT came out, I had just completed the manuscript for the previous SAT book, and then 2 weeks after that, they announced the change. So that was a little stressful.
I bet.
But right now, fortunately, there's been enough material released by College Board that we do have a very, very good idea of what the test entails. And so that makes my job as an author much, much easier. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
just working with the test, right? Like having the opportunity over years now to work with the test with students, I think really becomes very illuminating, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. You figure out where they're likely to have difficulties. Just as an example, I was surprised at how many of my students didn't understand what a complete sentence was. I wonder if you've had the same experience, but just being able to identify independent clauses is so fundamental to
Do you know
punctuation
if I
use.
had a nickel for every time I'm like, do you know what a sentence is? I would
Yeah.
possibly not be here with you doing this podcast. No,
There's
it's true. You're right.
Even better if I had a penny for every time they didn't know what a preposition was.
Yeah,
Oh,
not that. I mean, no, we
Swimming in
guys
copper.
could go on forever about
Yeah.
the things we
Yeah.
learn that our kids don't know or understand. Right.
yeah. So you learn what assumptions you can make, which ones you can't, and then just adding in quite a bit about identifying complete sentences in a recent book. So yeah, when you work with students, you figure out where they need the most help, and then you can articulate those strategies in the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, I found the first time I ever to teach for the PSAT, the new PSAT, right? You felt like you were kind of shooting at a target. You weren't quite sure where it was. And now I'm
Yeah.
sure all of us feel very different about the target. We know what the target is now, which is kind of a comforting
Absolutely.
feeling, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good segue to the point that the PSAT in its current form is fairly well known at this point.
Hmm.
We've had years now of close attention to the big transition from the old paper permutations of the SAT to the new digital SAT and PSAT. But some things have changed, many things remain the same. When it comes to the PSAT, why do we even talk about it apart from the SAT, right? Like why, the SAT is administered all year long. It's an important
Yeah.
uh, element of a selective or really most college applications and scholarship requirements. Why is the PSAT important compared to the SAT or the ACT for college admissions?
Sure. So I think one of the most important ways it's important is that it is a very close replica of what students will see on the SAT. And so students who prepare for the PSAT are likely to do well on the SAT, which in turn helps with college admissions. But beyond that, there are a lot of scholarships associated with the PSAT. There's the National Merit Scholarship, a number of sponsorships with those where you can get about $2,500 for that. But if you're thinking about large schools in the South and the West, there are many of those schools, like, for example, University of Oklahoma, BYU, Alabama, Mississippi, where they offer very substantial scholarships, even full rides associated with the PSAT. So I
Based
think
on the
that's,
PSAT, meaning based on National Merit Scholarship or just based on your
yeah,
outright score? So let's be
yeah.
clear. I think that we're implying something that we should state. The
Mhm.
PSAT, the 11th grade PSAT, is the single criterion for National Merit Scholarship qualification.
That's right.
And the
Exactly.
National Merit Scholarship and the associated scholarships, because as you say, there's a bunch of other ones that are
Mhm.
associated. The PSAT is the pathway to that.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of students, students might have knowledge of particular colleges they've heard about, they're interested in, and things, but they may not know all the colleges that could be a good fit for them, where they might have opportunities for scholarships. And taking the PSAT is a great way, if you sign up for the search service with that, that colleges can reach out to you, scholarship organizations can reach out to you, and you get get those connections throughout junior and senior year. Yeah.
Well, I also want to add too, because obviously
Mhm.
beyond the money piece, where we know some of that money is, like you said, Brian, tied to specific institutions, there is just the
Mhm.
recognition factor. I always sort of say to families, becoming a national merit semifinalist, finalist, scholar, any of the three, or even commended, right, the levels, that's an academic honor that like less than 1% of students can claim on their college application. And so to me, I always sort of liken it kind of like to the academic Olympics. Like you
Mhm.
are the cream of the crop, which, might not come with money, but certainly the accolades of being able to put that in application can be something significant for students.
Yeah, it's definitely a badge of honor where people later on in life, if you say you're a National Merit Scholar, National Merit Finalist, they'll know what you're talking about, and it gives you instant credibility with that. Yeah.
So we know
Is
that the PSAT can be important. My question would
Mhm.
be then it probably gets overlooked. Tell us what are some of the common mistakes you think that students make with the PSAT, and then maybe what would be some ways in which they might avoid making those mistakes.
Absolutely. I think there's a big learning curve to using the Bluebook application as they use with the PSAT.
And
Often the
actually, for
PSATs,
listeners who
yeah,
don't know what the Blue Book, this might be their first
yeah.
time even hearing anything about PSAT. Can you tell us what is Blue Book? What does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. The Blue Book is an application, a free application from College Board through which they administer the PSAT, the SAT, and increasingly AP exams. So students can download that, and it allows students to take the test on a computer or a tablet, and the test is given in an adaptive format where, depending on how students do, they will start with a moderately difficult module, and then depending on how they do, they'll get an easier or more difficult module, which allows the tests to be shorter, but still get quite a bit of information. So just taking some time to get familiar with that format, with some of the built-in tools that they have there, especially like the Desmos calculator, annotation feature, it pays serious dividends because I can't tell you how often I've had students look at it for the first time and just be blown away with how much time some of those in built-in tools can save them.
In
Yeah.
reference to that, I'm curious too for both of you how much those tools you incorporate into your instruction. I'm asking like peer-to-peer tutor as far as like,
Yeah.
do you think students are using them? How important do you think it is for students? We know Desmos. We'll just say, that's like Desmos is just important regardless. But I am curious about some of those features that we see in the reading, writing. How important do you think it is for students to know what they are and to use them? I'm curious, where you're at with that.
Brian?
Mikey, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. Well, yeah, Desmos goes without saying. That's huge. It's a game changer there. Also, there's a reference sheet on the math where often students don't realize, hey, if you just click on that, there's an area formula, volume formula you might need. It's probably available. On the reading, writing, I think one of the biggest tools I wish people would use more is just the piece of paper in front of them to maybe annotate, take some notes as they're using. Just use the old school,
The good old
use
fashioned
that
scrap paper.
Yeah, yeah,
You
because
really have to now because
yeah,
unfortunately, annotation on the device is not great, right? You
yeah.
can't really type a lot of notes. You can highlight,
Three
and
colors
I
of highlighting,
love
guys. 3 colors. I use
the
those
three
for
color
different
highlighting is
transitions.
amazing. And I have
Yeah.
some students that even explore the overlap
Hmm.
if they have to, if they need more colors. Like
Yeah.
students that
I
have
didn't
really
think about
precise,
that.
like
Well,
this,
you can
this, and
create
this.
more
Yeah.
colors by overlapping highlighters.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's a new one. I just learned something, guys.
Well, that's we knew that we would, if we ask enough professionals like
Purple,
different
green.
tools, right? And students discover these, but write the piece of paper when it comes to the challenging passages, these dense passages, sometimes students need to take notes.
They really
They
do. They really
can't just
do.
go
Yeah.
with what's in their head.
Well, I say
There's too much
paraphrase or
cognitive load.
predict, right? Use that scratch word. I actually do encourage students to kind of use what I call that digital post-it note, where you can like
Hmm.
paraphrase or predict and then sort of marry yourself to an idea once you go to the
Yeah.
answers. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I say with some of the tools, when I have students who have extended time, especially if they have the text read to them, being able to practice with that text to speech feature, having the time where if you do have double time, triple time, I found I've had more students with those accommodations find they use the annotation feature and like that quite a bit. But it can be a little time consuming if you have the typically allotted amount of time on the reading and writing. But definitely the math, I think the built-in tools will help a lot. And then just having awareness, you have the clock there, you can hide it if it bugs you. You can look at it if you want, and then we don't have to worry about did you perfectly bubble in the answer anymore. It's just you click on it or you didn't click on it. You can see if you've answered everything by looking at the tool at the bottom of the screen. So minimizes some of those errors that we had in the past. Yeah.
So, what are some other common mistakes you find students make?
A couple of big things I would say. One is going on autopilot. I think a lot of students wish they could look at the test and just immediately jump to an answer. Look at something and say, I always use a semicolon like this. Or, I when I see a math problem written in this way, I just have to go and do X, Y, Z to make it happen. But they really write questions where you have to fully understand what the task is, and you can't just jump to conclusions. So I think autopilot is the biggest enemy to success. Have you guys had a similar experience with that, where students just want to jump to answers, jump to conclusions a bit?
Well, I think my favorite example is the one about painting, and the last word is paint twice. And
Oh yeah, I know that problem.
I think even the word
Yeah.
twice is in the last line. So if you just read
Yes.
to paint,
Yes.
so the idea of reading, and I think that you're exactly right. This idea of jumping to conclusions, which by the way, any of us as tutors can fall into
Yeah.
that trap, having done so many of these. We're like, oh, but so knowing what traps there can be is very important to making sure that you don't either overestimate your abilities or underestimate the difficulty or challenge that the test is like that's inherently built into the test, right?
Right. And the
Definitely.
test is built, the team that puts a test like the SAT and PSAT together, they really understand human psychology,
Mhm.
particularly teen
Teen
tendencies, right?
psychology.
Whatever flaw a teenager can exhibit in the course of answering math, reading, or writing questions, it's documented, it's cataloged, and we know that the toughest questions exploit certain tendencies. That example that you gave, Amy, the paint twice, that happens to be a really difficult math question, and it's not difficult because it's a difficult calculation. It's difficult because there's an answer choice for if you miss the twice, that answer's there, and most students just answer it and they see their response. They never check to see what they're supposed to answer. So, and I'm not blaming test takers because the clock is ticking. But right, so when we talk about students preparing for tests like the PSAT, which in turn is preparation, the PSAT is not the practice SAT, but it is a preliminary SAT and it is amazing practice for the SAT. One of the benefits of the practice and coaching is learning all the different mistakes that the test maker is counting on you to make. Because then when you do, right, then like your approach, I'm sure we all teach students, like before you select a math answer, go back and make sure you're answering what the question is really asking, because you might have forgotten that you were solving for the answer twice and not once. You go back and you check that it's kind of like a pilot's checklist, right? Like you know these things, but you have to internalize them, and you can only internalize them by having them presented to you in a systematic way and then practicing over and over again, going through that checklist.
Well, I want to go back to referencing the strat paper and just saying in math, right? I think one of the challenges of a digital test is that because everything you're looking at is on the screen, I think it tends to discourage students from writing as much as they should. And as we all know in the case of math, the more you start to try to do those calculations in your head and you don't write them out, it increases the likelihood of error, missing something, calculating correctly. So writing out, I think, is incredibly important. And that's where a digital test sometimes seems to almost discourage you from doing that. But big mistake.
Yeah. One other thing, just in terms of another mistake, is the module 1 versus module 2 mindset. I think a lot of students, they start off with the moderate difficulty module 1 on both reading, writing, and math. They feel great on time. They can double check their work. And then when they get to the module 2, especially if they've gotten the harder one, it is challenging for a lot of students to finish. And so they need to adjust their speed. Some students might find they need to guess on some of the last couple of math questions. I've had other students find they like to start with the grammar, work their way to the end, come back and do the vocab and save some of those longer
I think a lot of us are
questions to the
teaching
end.
that pretty much all consistently now, right? Kind of dive into reading, writing more like 2/3 in where that the conventions start and kind of work to the end and work
Students
back
love
around.
that. Students uniformly appreciate the ability to have more time for to know how much time they have for the dense passages. And, you can't beat the math, right? Like if you're going to spend 4 minutes, if you're going to miss a question because you need 4 extra minutes, do you want to miss 3 or 4 writing questions or 1 reading question?
Right. 100%.
So basically everything we know that makes sense for the SAT makes sense for the PSAT. The PSAT is a great way for students to learn this. Which students should care most about PSAT, about doing their best on the PSAT? Like one of the reasons to do well on the PSAT is because you want to do well on the SAT. Another reason to do well on the PSAT is because you're hoping to be a National Merit Scholarship qualifier. How realistic is that?
It's pretty challenging to get national merit recognition of some kind. Typically, if you can get in the 95th percentile or above, you might be looking at commended scholar. But to get an actual national merit scholarship, it's only about 1/2 of 1% of students who get that. It does vary. The selection index does vary from state to state, where you have states that like Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. had very high selection index. Wyoming has a lower one. Ohio's pretty average.
I would say we're very average. We're in a good place, Brian, because it's like roughly out of that 228 index, we basically kind of land somewhere in that 217 to 219.
Oh, that's so.
But you, Mike, in New York, though, you're in a hard state.
Compared like 220, 221, just behind Connecticut at this point.
And with the selection index too, 2/3 of the selection index is based on the reading and writing score, and only a third is based on the math. So if someone is not very strong with reading and writing, they might want to bolster that in preparation for the PSAT, just the way the scoring works on it.
Does anybody think that we'll eventually eliminate that artifact? Everything about
Yeah.
the PSAT and the selection index reflects the old days when the writing section, like, it wasn't even part of the SAT first, and then they added it, and we had a 2400 test, and then we got rid of the 2400 test, but we
Hmm.
still had the 228 index. And even now, right? It used to be that there used to be fewer items and less time overall on the PSAT. And the old reasoning behind the fact that there was a scale that didn't reach 1600 was that there weren't enough points to earn. But today, the PSAT has exactly as many questions and exactly as much time as the SAT. There might be a little bit of math that's not covered. I don't know. Is there really anything else besides a couple of math concepts that
I don't think
students
so.
wouldn't see on the
Yeah.
PSAT? So it's
Which,
basically the
yeah.
SAT. When is it going to start to reflect the 1600 scale and not this weird
It's part of
228
the
index?
suite of assessments, like that kind of the way the
Right.
scoring goes from like PSAT 8-9 to PSAT. But I think one of the points that you're making, Mike, is that if someone's going to prepare for the PSAT, if you're really going to be intentional about it, you better register for the SAT, right? Because you've got
Mhm.
an October, SAT preceding a November or December, and then you don't get an SAT until March. So I do want to stress the fact that if someone's putting in a kind of an effort, if you will, to do well on the PSAT, they should be registered to take the SAT on October, November, and or December to make a real run at it.
That is such a powerful point to make, Amy, is right. If you are a prospective National Merit Scholarship winner, if you think that you're going to score in the high 90 percentiles, do not wait for your PSAT to be done before you decide what
Mhm.
you're going to do about the SAT. We've historically seen that. Families waiting until the PSAT is over, waiting for the scores to come in, being pokey about responding even then. And suddenly you miss the first half of 11th grade.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we know, those of us who work with students year in, year out, know the second half of junior year is generally more challenging
Yeah.
than the first half in terms of all the commitments, all the requirements, especially if you're an honors or an AP student. So, students who are National Merit Scholarship prospective, or even just students who think that they could do pretty well on the PSAT, have many opportunities to double the investment in preparation by also taking the SAT.
Yeah. And a lot of students who might be serious candidates for earning national merit recognition might find it helpful to take the SAT almost like a trial run, in August, September, or October prior to the PSAT. It's nice that College Board's added this September SAT for students. So I've had a number of students do that in the past and find that to be really helpful.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
year was a big win, right? Because we ended up with an
Oh, yeah.
August, September, October. So it really stacks the deck in kids' favor to go after prep for PSAT in the summer before their junior year and really
Mhm.
avail themselves of those dates that come right, like boom, 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 right before the actual PSAT in October. What is interesting though now about the PSAT in October, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, is because it's digital and schools have choice, the range of dates you could be doing PSAT prep can span, I think, as early as like almost first week of October.
Yes.
So I'm seeing
Mhm.
kids who aren't taking the PSAT till like the last week of October. So it's that season for prep can be a little bit longer than it used to be in the past.
Or shorter,
Yeah, right. It depends where you go to
right? It
school and what date
depends.
they've chosen.
And it could definitely, like, again, for people who are wondering, can I take the PSAT? Can I take the SAT before the PSAT? The answer is always yes.
I
One
also
does
want to
not require the other.
One other thing that's very interesting in the past, remember, if a student missed the PSAT that day, there was no option to make up. What we are
Yeah.
seeing now is actually if a student is going to realize they're going to miss, or maybe they miss the day, they may try to find other schools in the area who are offering it on a different day. We've seen that start to happen, schools being a little more open to having a student come in if something were to happen on their school's PSAT date to seek out another school who still has a date in the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And if someone has that situation, you can notify the National Merit Scholarship Corporation by mail by April 1st if you need an alternate entry. So even if you miss the PSAT, you might have another way of being in part of that competition. Yeah.
I want to throw in one last question just because we're on this topic of, tests and such. So, as far as the PSAT or the SAT goes, what do you think about prepping for the PSAT? Is it a good predictor for ACT? Does it help you with ACT? Because obviously some kids in the country are going to be considering the ACT as well.
I think an interesting thing, I'd be curious what you guys think about this as well, is that just the breakdown of the new ACT, they've made the science optional and it's no longer a factor in the composite score. So for students who are stronger in math, the SAT, half of the score comes from math.
True.
And on the ACT, just a third of the score comes from math. So I've had some students who tend to be very strong with English and reading decide the ACT might be a better fit for them. And then students who feel they're really strong with math, they might want to focus more on the SAT. I'm just curious what you guys think about that.
This is an interesting time to think about who might be better on which test because the ACT is in transition right now. In that, in the old days, meaning last month,
the old days, you mean our entire careers of ACT is what you're talking about.
It was always pretty clear that if a student was better on the reading, writing side, on the verbal side, then they had more of an advantage on the ACT because the ACT was only 25% math. Well, going forward, with the enhanced ACT, the composite score is now 1/3 math. That's a little bit, but it's more than it was.
Mm-hmm.
It remains to be seen if the old standard holds, right? That I think that it will remain true that certain students will do better on one, certain students will do better on the other. But I just see more and more students in 2025 focusing on the SAT.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys say?
I say, yeah, most of my clients now are more SAT focused. And I think, one thing is just you have the PSAT coming up, so it comes with the time of year, but also there's more certainty with the SAT right now. There are more released tests. We only have 4 released tests from ACT, and often you don't want to be the guinea pig the first go around. When there was the transition back in 2024 to the new SAT, a lot of students wanted to stick with the ACT. So, but it is nice this year for juniors that there will be stability. You'll know what you're getting, and we don't have to transition to a brand new test at some point this year.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying in terms of like your resources, right? There's 2 official PSATs available on Bluebook. There are 7 official SATs on Bluebook. There's the educator question bank. So there really are there's a lot of material there currently for anybody prepping for the PSAT and the SAT for sure.
But no doubt, this time next year when we have our PSAT conversation, it may be a very different calculus because there will be more known about the ACT. The SAT will be another year down the line, and it changes a little bit all the time. So that's what keeps these conversations interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm of the opinion, I think since I've been preparing students for these, I think that at no point has it been easier to switch between tests. A few years ago, you really had to make a decision, and there were a lot of books out there that would say, hey, pick ACT or SAT. I haven't seen many books like that still around. And the test seems to converge a bit more in terms of what they're testing and their timing and everything. And so I think I'm finding students it's easier to switch if they try one and it doesn't work as well, that they can pretty easily switch to the other one. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. Brian, as always, we could speak with you all day. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
If listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just go to my website, bwseducationconsulting.com.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guest on the next Tests and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Test and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.